Why is the man who needs nothing the greatest threat to society? Because the world survives by making you need. Need approval, need validation, need money, need status, need comfort. But what happens when a man needs none of it? He becomes untouchable. You cannot bribe him with gold. You cannot shame him with rejection. You cannot tempt him with applause, and you cannot enslave him with fear. A man who needs nothing cannot be bought, and what cannot be bought cannot be controlled. This is why society trembles before such a man, because his very existence is rebellion. He walks into a room and those chained by desire feel exposed. They see their dependence reflected back at them. They realize their lives are run by craving, not by choice. And here stands one who is free, not because he owns the world, but because the world owns nothing of him. Umres's power is not in having everything. It is in needing nothing. Governments fear such men. Corporations cannot sell to them. Narcissists cannot manipulate them because he is already whole. His silence is louder than their propaganda. His self-mastery is sharper than their weapons. And his freedom is more dangerous than their control. The man who needs nothing threatens society because he reminds us of the truth, that we were never born to be slaves of approval, possessions, or status. We were born complete. Most people spend their lives filling a void that was never empty. But this man has seen through the illusion, and once you see it, you can never unsee it. The man who needs nothing does not conquer others. He conquers himself, and by conquering himself, he conquers the world. That is why he is the greatest threat, not because he destroys society, but because he reveals it. And in revealing it, he sets others free. Detachment is not weakness, it is not indifference. It is strength disguised as silence. The man who needs nothing cannot be broken. Because what will you take from him? What leverage do you hold? Society survives by selling you hooks. Hooks of money, hooks of desire, hooks of praise, hooks of fear. But the man who is detached cuts the line. He does not bite. He does not swallow the bait. And suddenly the fisherman has no power. This is why detachment creates power. Because when you stop needing, you stop kneeling. Most men chase shadows. They run after recognition, like dogs chasing bones thrown by unseen hands. They fight for scraps of validation, never realizing the chains on their necks are made of their own hunger. But the detached man does not run. He does not beg. He does not chase. He waits. And because he waits, power flows toward him. You cannot lure a man who has no appetite. You cannot frighten a man who has already faced his emptiness. You cannot enslave a man who has nothing left to lose. The world misunderstands detachment. They think it means rejection of life. They think it means coldness. But true detachment is the highest form of freedom. It means you are not controlled by what you touch, what you own, or what you desire. Imagine two men. One is offered gold and he bows. The other is offered gold and he shrugs. Who is the master? Who is the slave? Detachment is not about refusing wealth. It is about wealth refusing to own you. Detachment is not about rejecting love. It is about love not turning into a chain. Detachment is not about leaving society. It is about society no longer ruling your soul. When you detach, you begin to see clearly. You see the games people play. You see the masks they wear. You see the traps disguised as gifts, and suddenly you are no longer a player on their board. You become the board itself. That is why the detached man is feared. He cannot be seduced by applause. He cannot be destroyed by rejection. He does not collapse when abandoned. He does not rise only when praised. He is stable, unmoved, grounded like a mountain, and mountains do not kneel to the wind. They let the wind pass. Detachment creates power, because power belongs to those who cannot be shaken. The attached man is a slave to circumstance. The detached man governs circumstance. Ask yourself, what weakness is greater than need? If your happiness depends on approval, anyone can control you. If your peace depends on wealth, anyone can tempt you. If your confidence depends on recognition, anyone can crush you. But if you need nothing, then nothing can touch you. You become unbreakable. Society thrives on dependence. It feeds on your hunger for status, your thirst for belonging, your craving for success. But once you detach, you starve the system, you cut its lifeline, you stand outside of it, untouched. People will call you dangerous. They will call you arrogant. They will say you are cold. But in truth, you are free. Because you have discovered the secret they fear, the one who needs nothing has already won. Look at history. The conquerors who bent empires were not those who craved. They were those who refused to be controlled. The monks, the sages, the thinkers, the warriors who walked with empty hands, yet carried unshakable authority. They were powerful not because of what they had, but because of what they no longer needed. Detachment is not retreat, it is advance. It is the hidden sword, the invisible shield. The man who needs nothing moves differently. He walks through temptation like it is smoke. He faces threats like they are whispers. He accepts both loss and gain with the same calm breath. You cannot bribe him, you cannot shame him, you cannot buy him, you cannot chain him. This is why detachment creates power, because every force of control loses its grip, because every illusion of need falls apart, because once you stand without leaning, you realize no one can push you down. When a man learns detachment, something greater happens. He begins to break free from desire itself. Desire is the leash. Desire is the chain. Desire is the invisible cage that looks like freedom, and society thrives on that cage. It needs you to want money, to want power, to want love, to want recognition. Because if you want it, they can dangle it. If you crave it, they can control you. If you hunger, they can feed you poison and call it bread. But what happens when you stop wanting? What happens when desire no longer owns you? You become unpredictable. You become untouchable. You become dangerous. Dangerous not because you harm others. Dangerous because you reveal the truth they are trying to hide. The truth that you do not need their system. The truth that you do not need their chains. Freedom from desire terrifies society because their power collapses the moment you no longer chase. A man without desire cannot be seduced. A man without desire cannot be bought. A man without desire cannot be enslaved. Think about it. The rich man is enslaved by the desire to stay rich. The powerful man is enslaved by the desire to stay powerful. The admired man is enslaved by the desire to stay admired. But the free man, he walks away with nothing and still remains whole. He loses everything and still remains unbroken. He is not addicted to the game, and that is why he wins without playing. Desire is the fuel of control. Remove desire and the engine of manipulation dies. Most people do not live. They chase the next goal, the next promotion, the next body, the next approval. And when they get it, they chase again. It never ends because desire has no finish line. But the man who steps off the track, he stops running, he stops competing, he starts living. That is why he is dangerous, because his existence exposes the lie. The lie that you must endlessly climb, endlessly chase, endlessly consume just to feel whole. He shows that you were already whole, that you were born complete. That desire was the illusion painted on your heart to keep you hungry, and the hungry are easy to rule. The starving are easy to manipulate. The desperate are easy to own. Freedom from desire is not weakness. It is the highest form of rebellion. It is the declaration that says, you cannot tempt me. You cannot own me. You cannot move me with empty promises. This is why rulers fear the man without desire. This is why corporations despise him. This is why manipulators avoid him, because nothing you offer will make him bow. His soul does not burn with hunger, it burns with clarity. He can walk away from wealth. He can walk away from praise. He can walk away from power, and his steps do not tremble. That kind of freedom is terrifying because it is contagious. When others see it, they begin to question their own chains. They begin to wonder, do I really need what I've been chasing? And that question alone is a threat to the entire structure of control. Freedom from desire is not easy. It's facing the hunger within. It requires looking at your cravings in the eye and asking, will this ever end? And when the answer is no, you learn to let go. You learn to stop needing. You learn to live in stillness instead of chasing storms. Most men fear this emptiness. But the man who walks into it discovers something shocking. He discovers that emptiness is not emptiness at all. No, it is peace, it is clarity, it is power. That is why the man free from desire is society's greatest danger, because he cannot be led like cattle. He cannot be herded like sheep. He cannot be bribed with shiny illusions. He has no hook in his mouth. He has no chain on his wrist. He has no hunger in his soul. And in a world addicted to craving, a man who desires nothing becomes the most powerful man alive. When a man frees himself from desire, something shifts in the air. It is not only his freedom that matters, it is the effect his freedom has on others. Because independence is contagious, and when one man breaks his chains, others begin to question their own. That is why independence inspires rebellion, not through shouting, not through fighting, but through presence, through example. A free man does not need to convince you. He does not need to argue with you. He simply lives differently, and that difference exposes your prison. Most people do not know they are chained. They think dependence is normal. They think craving is natural. They think kneeling for approval is just the way life works, until they see someone who does not kneel, until they see someone who walks untouched, until they see someone who lives without begging. Then the illusion cracks. Then the chains feel heavier. Then the question rises, if he can live free, why can't I? And that question is rebellion, because society does not fear your obedience. It relies on it. It fears your awakening. It fears your awareness. It fears your independence. Independence is fire. It starts in one man. It spreads quietly. And soon it burns through the lies that held everyone captive. That is why they fear the independent man. Not because of what he does, but because of what he awakens in others. His calm becomes a challenge. His stillness becomes a threat. His refusal to need becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, people see themselves. They see their dependence, they see their compromises, they see their lives traded away for the approval of others. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. That is how rebellion begins. One man says no. And suddenly others remember they also have the power to say no. One man walks away. And suddenly others realize the door was never locked. One man refuses to beg. And suddenly others see that begging was never survival. It was submission. Independence does not need an army. It only needs one man to stand tall, because when one stands, others learn they can too. History repeats this truth. Every rebellion begins with one man refusing to kneel, one woman refusing to obey, one voice refusing to be silent, and soon the silence start to whisper, the whispers turn into murmurs. The murmurs rise into shouts, and the structure that looked unshakable begins to crumble. That is why independence terrifies the powerful, because it spreads faster than fear, because it awakens faster than control, because it reveals what control truly is, a choice you no longer have to make. The independent man carries rebellion in his very existence, not because he declares war, but because he declares freedom. And freedom is the one thing control cannot survive. You can jail a body, but you cannot jail a spirit that has learned it needs nothing. You can silence a mouth, but you cannot silence a presence that shows another way of living. The independent man is dangerous because he is proof that you do not need permission to be free. Proof that chains are only chains if you agree to wear them. Proof that control is powerless against those who do not submit. This proof spreads like fire through the minds of others, and once it spreads, obedience begins to rot. Fear begins to weaken, and rebellion begins to grow. It does not start with swords. It does not start with noise. It starts with a whisper inside. Okay. I don't need what they told me. I need. That whisper is independence, and that whisper is the seed of rebellion. This is why the independent man is never truly alone. Because even when he stands by himself, he carries countless others in his shadow, others who will wake, others who will rise, others who will follow the fire of freedom. Independence inspires rebellion because freedom is irresistible. And once you taste it, you will never swallow chains again. Independence does not shout. It does not need to. Because silence itself is power, the man who has mastered himself does not need noise. He does not need to convince. He does not need to display. His stillness says everything. And this silence terrifies people because most men are loud to hide their weakness. Most men shout because they are afraid of being unheard. Most men fill the air because they cannot sit in their own emptiness. But the self-mastered man, he is comfortable in silence. He is not afraid of it. He lives in it. And in that silence, others feel exposed. Silence strips away illusions. It makes people confront themselves. When a man looks at you without speaking, your mask begins to crack. You feel the weight of your own lies pressing down. This is why silence intimidates. It reflects truth without words. It forces people to hear their own conscience. And when silence comes from a man who has mastered himself, it becomes unbearable to those who have not. Self-mastery is the sharpest weapon. It is the shield no one can break. Because how do you defeat a man who governs himself? How do you shake a man who has already faced his own chaos and conquered it? You cannot. And that is why he is feared. A man who has no control over himself is easily controlled by others. But the man who rules his own mind cannot be ruled. He does not react with impulse. He does not tremble under pressure. He does not chase approval, and he does not collapse under rejection. He owns himself, and the one who owns himself cannot be owned by anyone else. That is why leaders fear him. That is why manipulators avoid him. That is why narcissists hate him. Because they rely on reaction, they rely on weakness, they rely on your lack of self-control. But when a man has mastered his anger, he cannot be provoked. When a man has mastered his fear, he cannot be threatened. When a man has mastered his desire, he cannot be bribed. What weapon is left against such a man? None. And so they fear him, not because of what he does, but because of what he cannot be made to do. Self-mastery is not about perfection. It is not about never falling. It is about never being owned by what makes you fall. It is about facing your darkness until it no longer controls you. It is about knowing your weaknesses so deeply that no one can use them against you. The man of silence and self-mastery is dangerous because he is unreadable. You cannot predict him. You cannot manipulate him. You cannot box him in. His calmness is a storm to those who rely on chaos. His restraint is a blade to those who thrive on weakness. When he enters a room, his silence speaks louder than the loudest mouths. People shift. People feel uneasy because his presence reveals the instability in theirs. This is why silence is feared, because silence cannot be argued with. Silence cannot be debated. Silence cannot be defeated. The one who controls himself carries an aura that cannot be ignored. Even those who despise him feel it. Even those who oppose him respect it, because mastery cannot be faked. It is carved into the soul through discipline and truth. And when such a man speaks, he does not need many words. One sentence cuts deeper than 1,000 speeches. Because behind his words is not noise, but weight, the weight of mastery. Silence and self-mastery intimidate because they reveal weakness without attack. They break illusions without confrontation. They dominate without force. Most men try to command respect by shouting, but the self-mastered man commands respect by existing, by standing, by breathing, and those who try to break him end up breaking themselves against him. Because you cannot shake a mountain, you cannot drown the ocean, you cannot chain the wind. That is the secret of silence. That is the power of self-mastery. It cannot be conquered. It can only be feared.